Hi, I'm at the Phoenix Art Museum and was going through this beautiful exhibition on Sikh arts and valor, and I came across this lithograph of, and it's interesting, it says lithograph by Emily Eden, a Britisher from 1797 to 1869. This probably lithograph is dated around 1844. Who was Emily Eden? Emily Eden was a British writer, and she was also the daughter of William Eden, who was the first Duke of Auckland. Emily Eden traveled to India for about 6 years because his brother, George Eden, at that time was the Governor General of India between 1935 and 1942. She traveled with her sister. She went there very reluctantly. She was not excited about the whole thing. She, however, traveled with his brother extensively when he traveled in north of India at that time. The northern provinces were interesting to the British at that time because they were worried about Russia coming through Afghanistan into northwest India. She made extensive notes, wrote letters, and this was published, her first book in 1867, and the book was called Up the Country, and this is a lithograph of the Akalis. The other question comes up, who are these Akalis? They seem to be warriors. Yes, they indeed were. They're Sikh warriors. And in the modern lingo, you would classify them as that they were a combination of mercenaries and a Delta Force Sikh soldier. Why mercenaries? But they were never motivated by money. They were motivated by the ideology of the 10th Guru of the Sikhs, Guru Gobind Singh, his ideology. And they were very free-spirited soldiers who ran very atypical wars. Predominantly, they fought for what they thought was right, being righteous.
I'm here with Pravinderjit Kanuja, historian, curator at the Sikh Art Museum, where we were looking at some of the pictures of the Akalis. Pravinderjit, Akalis are Khalsa who drive strength from Guru Gobind Singh Ji. Can you give us a little bit background of where all this started?
So the Akalis are considered as the immortals or timeless. This term was supposed to be first used during Guru Gobind Singh's time. These followers are prepared to sacrifice their all for protection of religious beliefs in places. They are not any different sects or they do not differ from other Sikhs in respect about following the doctrine. They are characterized by purity of character, sincere conviction, and are the epitome of Chardi Kala, which is eternal optimism and gratefulness in spite of all difficulties. They had a very hard time from early 1700s till mid to late 1700s when they were hunted down by the Mughals. They lived in the jungles and their home was the saddle of a horse. They were regarded as the guardians of Akal Takht and Golden Temple till the Britishers annexed Punjab in 1749. They identify by dark blue garments, typical headdress, which is a tall conical turban with coats, double-edged swords, and kirpan.
Pravinderjit, now let's talk about one of the most famous Akalis, Akali Phula Singh, who was, as you know, from Amritsar and basically thought himself as a guardian of the Akal Takht, or the meaty portion of Sikhi.
So Akali Phula Singh was a true saint soldier, a follower of Miri Piri. He was from the Khalsa Shahidi Misl. He was the leader of, subsequently became the leader of Buddha Dal, and in 1800 he became the Jathedar of Akal Takht. He was born in 1761 and was trained in spiritual and martial arts. He was a general in Ranjit Singh's army. However, he chose to stay in Amritsar, the home of the Akal Takht, where he was the Jathedar. He was loved by the common people. He took care of the poor people. He was considered as a simple man with a high character. He usually commanded 2,000 to 3,000 Akalis in different battles. He was involved in multiple battles, including Multan, Kashmir, Attock, and now Shera, where he died in 1723. The Akalis were given the toughest assignments during these wars. And in fact, it is because of them some of the events in the wars would change because of their bravery and their discipline.
Pravinderjit, Akali Phula Singh was a great warrior, we know that, and he commanded a lot of Akalis. But he himself also thought of as guardian of the Sikh faith, or the prime person of the Akal Takht. Give us an incident where he showed his authority over the whole Sikh Panth.
So, Maharaja Ranjit Singh married outside the Sikh faith. As Jathedar of Akal Takht, this was not allowed in the Sikh tradition. So Akali Phula Singh asked Ranjit Singh to appear at the Akal Takht, where he was reprimanded and he asked for forgiveness. Also, Akali Phula Singh showed displeasure to Ranjit Singh for having Dogras and Brahmins in very senior positions in his army and in his administration, and ultimately that led to the downfall of the Khalsa Raj, when these generals and senior administrators betrayed the Sikhs against the Britishers.
Pravinderjit, our previous conversation, Akalis, we know, were a great fighting force, and we had great leaders. But that's not the total story. We know that in early 1900s, Akalis took a great part in a non-violent movement which restored the custodianship of the Gurdwaras to the Sikhs. Can you please elaborate on that movement?
So the history is that in 1849, the Britishers annexed Punjab. Unfortunately, they also took over the Sikh shrines, and they were put under the British resident, who appointed 10 members. The head was the Sadra, who managed the daily affairs. In 1863, the Government of India Act 20 divested itself of administration and management of religious institutions. Unfortunately, the Punjab government deliberately violated this, and this is the only religion in which the British government completely tried to control the religion and the religious places. The start of the Singh Sabha movement started in 1873. The purpose was to educate the masses, bring political awareness, make them aware of the cultural heritage and religious reform. The Akalis, the next generation, with a history of fearlessness and protection of the faith and religious institutions, started the next phase, and they were symbols of purity, strict morality, and accepted non-violence as their creed. The government controlled the Gurdwaras, and unfortunately, at that time, there was indulgence of evil practices there, idol worship, molestation of women, ritual and ceremonies against the Sikh tenets. Shri Mani Akali Dal was formally founded in December of 1920. The Kali movement was actually started earlier than that. The goal of the Kali movement which was formally from 1920 to 1925, was to have the Sikh religious places under Panthic control, removal of the Mahants, and practice Sikh religion according to the tenets of the Gurus. During this period of 1920 to 1925, which formulated into the Sikh Gurdwara Shrine Bill and gave control to the SGPC of over 200 important Gurdwaras in 1925. This movement was a non-violent, peaceful agitation and was a prelude to the national Indian movement. During this time, more than 30,000 women and men were behind bars, more than 400 unfortunately died, and 2,000 were wounded, along with dismissal of services, withdrawals of jagirs, pensions, and jobs and benefits. Unfortunately for some of the veterans of World War I who had fought for the British Empire, Jathas would go to Harmandir Sahib and would take a vow to remain silent and peaceful during protest. They would be physically abused and turn this into a triumph of their spirit with which they endured such hardship. I have a few quotes regarding this Akali movement from some personalities of those days. In January of 1922, keys of the temple were handed to SGPC and the Akali prisoners were released. Mahatma Gandhi, quote, said this is the first battle for India's freedom. I also was able to use these two books regarding some of the content of this. It's a very interesting book. The Gurdwara Reform Movement and Sikh Awareness was first published in 1922. This is the Akali Movement book, and I have a quote here from Jawaharlal Nehru, who became India's Prime Minister later. I rejoice that I am being tried for a cause which the Sikhs have made their own. I was in jail when the Guru Ka Bagh struggle was gallantly fought and won by the Sikhs. I marveled at the courage and sacrifice of the Akalis and wished that I could be given an opportunity of showing my deep admiration of them by some form of service. That opportunity has now been given to me, and I earnestly hope that I shall prove worthy of their high tradition and fine courage. Sat Sri Akal, Jawaharlal Nehru, 25th September 1923.
Now,
Another quote by C.F. Andrews, a Christian missionary who saw the treatment of the Akali Jathas. Unfortunately, some of them were recent veterans of World War I and fought for the British Empire. His quote was, inhuman, brutal, foul, cowardly, incredible to an Englishman, and a moral defeat of England. I must say, the world is indebted to the Akalis. The Akali movement was the source and a prelude for the Indian national movement of peaceful agitation for independence, which was adopted in the rest of the world in the future, and they serve as a source of inspiration to all of us around the world.